This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform to build a professional website, strengthen your brand, and grow your business online. Legends on Sean Connery's level you can count on one hand. That's when a star is no longer just an elite employee, but an ageless colossus. And everyone is running around it no matter what. Top directors with their best scripts, studios with truckloads of cash, and Hollywood chicks with equally interesting offers. But how did a guy who grew up in a closet become the royal gentleman everyone worships? How do his attempts to escape Bond almost bankrupt him? What did he pull off to get back to a height nobody ever returns to? And how did the actor stay true to himself until the end, turning down roles in 3 of the biggest franchises of the early 2000s? This is Hollywood lore. Let's go. Before becoming the legendary Gramps, little Thomas Sean Connery lived in a wardrobe in Edinburgh. And it's not a metaphor. The actor's family was so broke, they had no electricity, no hot water, not even a bed for the kid. Such a hardcore background slightly hints that Connery had zero connections in the movie industry, just like Mel Gibson, for instance. And just like Mel, Sean had some scary experience working as a loader, a driver, and even a coffin polisher. Connery was also a solid football player and a fighter. He never made it as a ballet dancer, nor did he learn to throw a proper spin kick or do splits, something one legendary master would later punish Sean for. But the actor did bodybuilding, which is a pretty decent substitute. He even worked as a model at an art school, and then such a Chad caught the eye of the Scottish Army. Sean went there too and learned how to disarm real gangsters. We'll come back to that in a minute. Later on, Manchester United invited him to play football, but Connery figured a pro athlete's career doesn't last long and refused. So as you can see, after trying almost everything, Connery got tired and decided to become a talented actor. Sean started his career in the theater, then moving to small TV shows and equally small films. Earning a bronze at the Mr. Universe contest in London boosted Connery's career a bit. But the real turning point came at the end of the 50s. It was the movie Another Time, Another Place, where he starred alongside Lana Turner, one of the biggest sex symbols at the time. She and Connery were doing so well on camera that the actress's lover and part-time gangster Johnny Stompanato showed up on set. Using a gun as an extra argument, the gangster tried to convince the actor to look worse on camera next to Turner, and Connery somehow managed to disarm him and throw out of the studio. It would be logical to assume this story alone earned him the title of Agent 007, but in reality, it didn't happen quite that way. The film that eventually got Connery into the Bond franchise was the 1959 Darby O'Gill and the Little People. Walt Disney's project didn't become particularly famous or successful, but it still made it into American theaters, where Albert Broccoli's wife happened to see it. So when the casting for Dr. No started, she remembered that nice fellow from the Disney film and began convincing the producer that they absolutely needed him. At least that's the legend. What's known for sure is that the first choice for Bond was Cary Grant, who'd recently shown in Hitchcock's thriller North by Northwest. But Dr. No was meant to be the first film in the series, and Grant was a highly in-demand, very expensive actor who was already talking about retirement. In the end, Albert Broccoli decided it was better to cast some affordable Joe that nobody needed and whose schedule wasn't booked for years ahead. Actually, that's also why Roger Moore didn't get the role at first. The author of the Bond novels, Ian Fleming, wanted more specifically, but the actor was tied up by a TV contract, which kept him from becoming Bond a decade earlier. No one was counting on Dr. No becoming a huge hit. The plan was to spend about $1 million, maybe making 6 back, and nobody expected any high demand for a lead actor in a project like that. Connery later said he signed on for Bond, fearing the contract would limit and ruin his career. But he still did it since there weren't exactly lines of directors forming outside his door. Director Terrence Young wasn't thrilled about Connery either. He thought Sean's manners were a bit too vulgar for such a man of class as Bond. But eventually Young accepted the actor and pulled off a My Fair Lady trick on set, teaching Connery how to move, talk, and carry himself like a proper gentleman. It's worth mentioning that even with all that training, Connery was still missing something for the image of an irresistible dandy. And that something was hair. The actor started going bald early, and that's why he wore a wig in all the Bond films.
Have you worn wigs?
No, I have not.
Looking that polished Connery hit movie screens in 1962, and that's when something unexpected happened. In the US alone, Dr. No made $16 million, which is already a big deal for a film with a budget of $1 million, and that's not even counting the worldwide release. It's now estimated that the rest of the world brought another 40 million or so, pushing the total to 60. And speaking of suddenly blowing up worldwide from something filmed on a microscopic budget, this video is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform to build a professional website smoother than James Bond seduces yet another suspiciously glamorous accountant. But unlike Bond, you won't need any Walter PPK wigs or luck. You can just casually sit in a chair like Steven Seagal during fight scenes and enjoy Blueprint AI assembling your entire layout. Build your own evil mastermind online hub and kickstart your personal villain arc. Throw your videos and courses behind a paywall or use scheduling tools to train your henchmen online. And if something doesn't work, use integrated analytics to see exactly which pages convert and which ones are heading straight into the abyss, like the last Witcher season. And by the way, every Squarespace website is mobile ready by default, so your awesome page won't end up squeezed on a phone screen like Dwayne Johnson in a plane seat. Try it yourself. 14 days free, no credit card, no drama. Head to squarespace.com/HollywoodLore for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use code HollywoodLore to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
Honey Penny, won't you ever believe me?
Now back to Bond. Right alongside Dr. No, another film with Sean came out, The Longest Day. And that one was financially successful too. Plus, it got buried under Oscar nominations. Even though Connery wasn't a lead in The Longest Day, having 2 box office hits in 1 year is no joke for a newbie actor. So for the next Bond film, Sean asked for $250,000. For comparison, in Dr. No, the actor starred for food and only later received a $20,000 bonus to celebrate the big success. For From Russia with Love, the studio doubled the budget to $2 million. It's believed that this particular Ian Fleming's novel was picked because John Kennedy was a big fan of it, and very important people just couldn't waste that kind of free PR. It's also believed that was the last movie the president watched before his trip to Dallas, which definitely didn't hurt the film's marketing as well. As a result, From Russia with Love made around $80 million at the box office, a very impressive number for that time. For Goldfinger, Connery asked for $500,000. That doesn't sound like much now. Just think of Mel Gibson pocketing $25 million per role. But in the 60s, big stars like Kirk Douglas were making about that much, and only Hollywood's elite like Cary Grant or Marlon Brando demanded $1 million or so. A new Bond movie was coming out every year, and each one broke the box office record set by the previous. Goldfinger made $125 million, while costing just $3 million. Bad people say this was largely thanks to the change of director. Terrence Young was tired of the franchise, so Guy Hamilton took over. He's the one who brought in the Aston Martin and villains who'd rather deliver a dramatic monologue than just finish the job. And of course, the cute fights with Q and a girl, with the curious name
Pussy galore.
I must be dreaming.
The success was so huge that a line of directors and producers quickly formed outside Connery's house. They all wanted to offer the actor something, and Sean didn't turn all of them down. In the mid-60s, several films came out with him, including Hitchcock's Marnie, Sidney Lumet's The Hill and Woman of Straw with Gina Lollobrigida. The famous Italian actress had a habit of showing up late on set, and Connery made it pretty clear what he thought about that. After one of the arguments, they filmed a slapping scene, and the actor put so much into it that afterward, Lollobrigida had to be shot mostly from behind for a while. Actually, Connery was always a big believer in equality and never hesitated to say in interviews that he didn't see much difference between men and women. Meaning, if someone is asking for a good old smack and there are no alternatives in sight, then you absolutely give that smack, regardless of any body specifications. And the actor, by the way, never changed that opinion throughout his entire life. Thunderball already had a budget of $9 million, 3 times more than Goldfinger. Terrence Young, who'd kicked off the Bond franchise, came back to direct. Young admitted that the hardest part of the shoot was finding Connery. Thunderball was filmed in the Bahamas, and the locals adored the actor, following him everywhere. It's unclear whether that affected Sean's growing desire to run from the franchise, but that's exactly when he voiced it. The statement was the usual.
I'm just tired. The days are short. I don't know. Maybe I'm depressed.
But since Thunderball earned $141 million worldwide, the producers didn't want to hear anything about being tired. Connery kept refusing for a while, until the studio finally threw $750,000 his way, plus 25% of the profits from the next film, You Only Live Twice. It seems no one was completely happy with those terms, and on set of You Only Live Twice, the atmosphere was what we'd now call toxic. Connery was so fed up with pressure and conflicts that he refused to come on set if director Terrence Young, producer Albert Broccoli, or any of the very important people were around. They, in turn, were clearly unhappy with the actor's growing appetites. And after filming was finished, they decided to part ways with Connery. The numbers probably didn't help either. Sure, You Only Live Twice grossed $111 million on a $9 million budget, but it was still less compared to Thunderball. Sean was finally free, and suddenly things went wrong very fast. All of the actors' new films started sinking. The Western Shalako, for which Sean got a full million like a real grown-up, flopped. Same happened to The Anderson Tapes and The Molly Maguires. Molly became one of the biggest failures of 1970 with its $11 million budget. The drama The Red Tent, a joint production of the USSR, Britain, and Italy, cost almost the same. It's hard to talk about box office numbers here, but according to some reports, around 11 million people watched the movie in the Soviet Union, which by local standards wasn't impressive. The only positive thing was that The Red Tent got a Golden Globe nomination, but aside from their jury, hardly anyone noticed the film. In short, without Bond, Connery's career didn't feel good, but people were still willing to forgive both the flops and some funny tricks, like dating two actresses at once during a shoot or punching someone in the mug under the cover of Bond's license. Riding the Bond hype train, Sean became the face of the American bourbon brand Jim Beam, and no one hid the fact that he was seen as the real agent. Well, definitely not George Lazenby, who tried to replace Connery in the late 60s. Observing all this, the studio quickly booted Lazenby out and tried to lure Connery back into the franchise. They decided to tempt him with a crazy salary of $1,250,000 plus 12% of the box office taking for Diamonds Are Forever box office, which meant another $6 million or so, and Connery just couldn't resist such a sweet carrot. At least that's the version invented by very bad people. Good people say Lazenby himself refused to continue, feeling the pressure of his predecessor's immense talent. The third version claims nobody liked Lazenby at all, and he only got the part because during auditions he did a very good job pretending to be an actor. When that bold scam came to light, someone else was needed ASAP. And the most common version is the weakened box office performance of On Her Majesty's Secret Service. But $82 million on a budget of $7 million isn't terrible enough to make you cry and call for your mom. Either way, Connery returned to the role of Bond in Diamonds Are Forever. The studio worried audiences wouldn't get the joke with swapping the actors and played it safe, giving the film a modest budget of $7 million. At the box office, Diamonds Are Forever made $116 million, so there was no need to worry at all. Rumors were that for the next Bond film, Connery was offered $5 million. Those rumors clash with indirect signs that Roger Moore had already been chosen as the successor by then, so there couldn't have been any money talks with Sean. Anyway, Connery had zero desire to return as 007, and he made some clever preparations for his future projects. Thanks to his contract with the Bond producers, Sean got funding for 2 films, but everything went wrong again. The first one was Sidney Lumet's The Offense, and the movie was so unwanted it didn't even get a theatrical release in most countries. Freaked out that the second project would turn out even worse, the important people canceled the contract with Connery and paid a penalty. So the second film simply never happened. The actor's paychecks collapsed too. For the low-budget Zardoz, he got $200,000. Today, the movie is sort of a cult thing in certain circles, but back then it completely sank.
Penis is evil.
The success of Sidney Lumet's Murder on the Orient Express in 1974 kept Connery afloat for a while. But from 1975 to 1982, the actor appeared in 15 projects, and almost all of them flopped financially. Yes, even a classic like The Man Who Would Be King by Oscar-winning John Huston. Huston had dreamed of making that film back in the 50s and planned to cast Clark Gable and Humphrey Bogart as leads. But in the 70s, he ended up filming Sean Connery and Michael Caine. Whether Clark Gable would have agreed to cosplay Geronimo on set the way Connery did is unknown. Out of the whole flop parade Connery had during these 7 years, only a few films stand out. Among them are Terry Gilliam's Time Bandits, Richard Attenborough's A Bridge Too Far, and Michael Crichton's The Great Train Robbery. Crichton was only 36 years old at the time, and Connery only started occasionally calling him director on set after watching Crichton's previous film Coma. You can't really say The Great Train Robbery was a hit. It made just $13 million on a $7 million budget. A Bridge Too Far had similar results, despite the insane cast. The only movie that really succeeded financially was Time Bandits. 1981 was a miraculous time when Terry Gilliam's films didn't bomb, and this $5 million one made $42 at the box office. The role was written specifically for Connery, without much belief he'd actually show up in the film. and Sean not only showed up, but also did his own stunts, as he did in almost all his movies. There are rumors that Connery's career could have been far more interesting back then. Like 2 major roles in Star Wars and Blade Runner were offered to the actor, and he refused, but there's no solid confirmation of that. In short, by the early 80s, Sean's career was sinking monumentally, but it took him a couple more films to reach depths where Steven Seagal dwelled. Meanwhile, he starred in films like Outland, directed by Peter Hyams, a curious man talented at shooting darkness in the dark. Because of his cinematic gem, Connery didn't get into Chariots of Fire, which performed brilliantly at the box office, and won the Oscar for Best Picture. But Sean couldn't participate because of Hyams, who honed his director's skills so he could later drown the careers of 1 Austrian and 1 Belgian with some extra style. 5 Days, One Summer by Fred Zinnemann flopped as well and ended Zinnemann's career. Connery polished off these fails with the comedy Wrong is Right, whose ratings have sunk to depths people don't mention in decent society. Sean later claimed things were so bad that he stopped getting any offers at all. On top of that, in the 80s, the actor nearly went bankrupt after pouring almost all his money into some questionable deals, which is why he agreed to star in another Bond film that isn't considered part of the franchise. The film with the mocking title Never Say Never Again came to life because of a lawsuit between producer Kevin McClory and United Artists. Those lawsuits started back in the early 60s over nuances tied to Thunderball, and in the end, McClory got the rights to produce 1 Bond film based on that novel. Sean returned to the Pirate Bond saga for a $5 million paycheck plus 5% of box office earnings. The actor said he was broke and couldn't miss such a crap load of money, and most importantly, they promised to invite an Aikido legend on set. Steven Seagal trained Connery for the film and worked so hard that while showing some moves, accidentally broke the actor's wrist. Sean held no grudge against the Grandmaster and said he had a great time. At first he thought the tingling in his wrist was just age, but then a doctor diagnosed a fracture. It's known that Sean personally hired several screenwriters because he thought the script for Never Say Never Again was hopeless garbage. All his writers tried to fix it and supposedly succeeded. The very special Bond hit theaters in 1983, the same year Octopussy with Roger Moore was released. Either audiences really wanted to see Connery as Bond again, or just didn't bother questioning things. But at the box office, the pirate Bond with Connery made only $20 million less than the official film. Costing a hefty $36 million, Never Say Never Again earned $160. But such a movie didn't help Connery's career much. The actor had already started drifting toward the Cannon Group, where he might have even met another Grandmaster a few years later and maybe experienced some more broken wrists. But in 1986, The Name of the Rose by Jean-Jacques Annaud happened. According to legend, Annaud even had to give up partial financing because of Connery. Columbia Pictures insisted on booting Sean out, since he was considered a guaranteed box office failure outside the Bond franchise. But the director just smirked. Most of the budget came from European investors, so the director chose to have Connery instead of having some extra money. The Name of the Rose succeeded, or rather performed very solidly, for a purely European film. The movie made $77 million on a budget around 17, collected a bunch of different nominations, and Connery himself won BAFTA for Best Actor. That same year, Sean also appeared in Highlander. That movie wasn't considered a good opportunity at first. Even Mickey Rourke refused to participate. Sean agreed only because they offered him $1 million for 20 minutes of screen time. Highlander flopped in theaters, but quickly grew into a cult hit, becoming one of the most rented VHS tapes of the late 80s. For about a week, Sean was getting praised by everyone, and then in 1987, he got a real reboot. The studio didn't get why the Untouchables needed an expired actor. The adaptation of some philosophy and history weirdo's book, The Name of the Rose, didn't interest anyone in the States, and Highlander was only about to become a hit on home video. But the director of The Untouchables, Brian De Palma, also wanted Connery in his movie. He didn't even care that the character was Irish, while Sean's accent was Scottish, with some trademark nuances. In his earlier films, Connery did most of his own stunts and never got seriously injured. And that was until Connery crossed paths with the pyrotechnics crew of The Untouchables. Insane chemical skills led to Sean blowing up for real in one of the scenes, after which he was taken away by ambulance with burns and eye injuries. In theaters, Big Badabooms made $106 million on a budget of $25, and critics buried the movie under dozens of nominations. And Connery stood out the most. He got both a Golden Globe and an Oscar for that role. The next day, a full-on traffic jam of producers and directors formed right at the actor's door. Among them was that guy filming Darkness in the Dark, Peter Hyams, who invited Connery to his new movie, The Presidio, and Sean said yes, though calling that film a big success is hard. Family Business from Sean's favorite director, Sidney Lumet, didn't do too great either. But it was 1989, and anyone really paying attention could already tell the actor's career was about to get the next significant boost. Later on, Steven Spielberg and George Lucas would say they couldn't picture anyone but Connery as Indiana's dad, and it had nothing to do with the Oscar for The Untouchables. That decision was based on the running gag that Bond is probably Indy's dad, and Spielberg's old dream to direct a movie about 007. So the director basically decided to sit on two chairs at once. The fact that Connery was only 12 years older than Harrison Ford didn't bother anyone either. According to people involved, these two improvised a lot on set, and at one point, they literally ended up without their pants. During the Zeppelin scene, it was extremely hot, so Sean just took off his trousers and shoes, an old habit from his Bond days. Ford laughed and did the same, and the scene was shot almost in one take. The third Indiana Jones became a huge box office hit, earning $474 million while costing $48, and lots of viewers still called The Last Crusade the best film in the whole franchise. Once Connery was done chasing the Grail, not only the offers began flying at him, but also suitcases full of money. Now the actor could afford to walk away from any movie, and maybe even throw a suitcase of cash at someone too. Like when Sean got $4 million for The Hunt for Red October, and realized he now couldn't make Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, even though he'd promised everyone and already signed. Connery had to give about $500,000 to the film's producers just to keep them from yelling too loudly. At first, Sean didn't even want to be in The Hunt for Red October. He figured the Cold War was over and movies like that made no sense anymore. But the producers assured the actor they were making a real historical film directed by John McTiernan, the same guy who'd just blown up the box office with Die Hard and Predator. As an extra argument, the producers significantly raised Sean's paycheck and he finally agreed. It was a right call. The movie became a financial hit, staying at #1 for several weekends, and in the end, only lost out to Pretty Woman. By the way, Connery could have starred there too. At first, Disney wanted Sean Connery and Meg Ryan for Pretty Woman, meaning the actor could have had two box office hits back-to-back. Instead of Pretty Woman, Sean did The Russia House and the Highlander sequel. They flopped in theaters, but the talented actor still got $4 million for each. And on the Highlander set, Connery was there for only 9 days. He spent even less time shooting Robin Hood in 1991, but that was just a cameo he jumped into because of his big friendship with Kevin Costner. Connery got $250,000 for that role and handed it straight to charity. Worth saying the actor donated a lot of his paychecks to various foundations throughout his whole career. For Medicine Man in 1992, Connery got $10 million. It was another John McTiernan project, and it became the first major flop for both the resurrected Sean and the director. McTiernan later blamed the studio for everything, but he wasn't without fault either. When it became clear they'd have to film in another location, he demanded they bring in animals and even South American natives to Mexico because it was super important. That's how the budget of a small movie ballooned to $40 million, and Medicine Man only made $60 at the box office. Actress Lorraine Bracco, who starred with Sean in this one, had previously been this close to Oscar, and for Medicine Man, she ended up getting a Razzie nomination. Connery's career didn't even notice that flop, though, and for Rising Sun, he got another $10 million. The actor signed on because of Michael Crichton, since they'd already worked together in The Great Train Robbery. Crichton later Delta when very important people brought in Wesley Snipes against the director's wishes, but Sean couldn't pull off the same move anymore. Rising Sun didn't tank at the box office, but it didn't meet the studio's expectations either. Funny thing is, Connery could have starred in another Crichton adaptation instead. Spielberg spent a long time running around Sean trying to talk him into playing Professor Hammond in Jurassic Park. The director was even ready to expand the role for such a talented actor, but Sean still said no. Later, he admitted he just didn't get what the heck that project was, and thought that dinosaurs would be puppets, and he didn't want to participate in a puppet show or whatever. Early on, Spielberg really did plan to use those outdated techniques, thinking visual effects weren't good enough to show dinosaurs properly. In the end, Jurassic Park brought in revolutionary CGI, and the damn animatronic puppets made almost $1 billion at the box office, making it the highest-grossing film in history. Well, at least until Jack and Rose jogged a bit across the Titanic. The whole Jurassic Park story is one of legendary Sean's refusals, and he'd have plenty more of those later. For example, in the mid-90s, Connery could have jumped into Braveheart, meaning he could have not only starred in a box office hit, but most likely received some kind of award for the role. Back then, Gibson's films were showered with them, and we talked more about that in our recent video about Mel. But Connery chose the flop A Good Man in Africa, also adding Just Cause and First Night, which both disappointed the studios with box office numbers. Things went a bit better with Dragonheart, where Sean voiced the dragon and got $5 million for that. Robin Williams offered his voice for half the price, but the producers just patted him on the shoulder. Still, despite the refusals and a streak of not-so-successful projects, Connery caught another hit in 1996 and got a record fee for it at the time. At first, the role in The Rock was offered to Austria's main bicep, but he turned it down. Sean wasn't eager to participate either, even for $12 million. The actor kept refusing until he noticed an unbearably talented nephew in the cast. Sean remembered Nicholas from Moonstruck and really wanted to work with him. So when Connery heard the studio was planning to replace Cage, he gently asked them not to, and everyone suddenly agreed that Nicholas was a pretty decent actor. The same thing happened later with Michael Bay. The director had already been summoned to get his butt kicked, but Connery showed up with him and spent a long time yelling at some very important people from Disney. From all the yelling, you could only make out that some idiots were distracting a talented director from his work, and Sean wasn't about to tolerate that. Connery's persuasion skills also helped him to get some personal perks. The filming took place on Alcatraz, so the actor asked for some kind of housing right on the island. Sean insisted he was too old for riding ferries every day, and without those trips, the creative process would go smoother. And they really did put together a house for Connery out of a couple of big trailers. The Rock became a box office hit and one of the defining action movies of the 90s. Connery himself said more than once that he considered it one of the best films in his career, and the best one he made after 1990. After The Rock rocked, people were already throwing $15 million at Connery for a role. But he decided to chill a bit. So when Steven Spielberg rushed in with an offer for Amistad, he was asked to get lost again. The producers of The Jackal tried to lure Sean into the role Bruce Willis eventually played, but they were sent to the same address as Spielberg. In that case, though, the refusal was because Connery didn't want to play a killer, and for the same reason, he turned McTiernan down on the third Die Hard. Instead of portraying villains, the actor came back from vacation in 1998 with two movies, Playing by Heart and The Avengers. Both movies sank at the box office, but the second was such a disaster, Marvel was scared to use the same title for their crossover 15 years later. Things with the Imposter Avengers started out well enough. It was the adaptation of the 60s British TV series of the same name with Diana Rigg. She later played Bond's girl in the Lazenby film, by the way, but most people know her as the badass granny from Game of Thrones. Anyway, because of his love for that series, Connery signed on to the Avengers without even looking. And right behind him came Ralph Fiennes, Uma Thurman, and others who dreamed of starring with Sean. The original cut of The Avengers ran for more than 2 hours, but when the result was sent to test screenings, viewers just died right in their seats, so the movie was mercilessly cut. Things were so bad the studio eventually gave up and didn't promote the film, throwing it into theaters as it was. The Avengers flopped exactly as expected, and earned Connery his first Razzie nomination. For Entrapment, he got $20 million, a third of the movie's budget. It brought Connery another Razzie nomination, this time along with Catherine Zeta-Jones, his on-screen girlfriend with a 40-year age gap. But aside from the critics, it seems everyone gave zero damns, so Entrapment did great at the box office. After that, Connery moved on to Gus Van Sant's Finding Forrester. And here, it's impossible not to mention that instead of this movie, the actor could have starred in 3 golden franchises of the early 2000s. One by one, Connery turned down The Matrix, The Lord of the Rings, and Harry Potter. He explained passing on Morpheus by claiming he didn't understand a thing in that weird script. Sean didn't want to play Dumbledore either, since he thought Joan Rowling's books were mediocre and unworthy of any attention. With Gandalf, things got even more interesting. The producers did everything in their power to drag Connery into the film, including offering absolute immodesty. $10 million for each part, plus 15% of the trilogy's box office earnings. And even that didn't convince the actor. Sean said that at his age, he's not into traveling in the middle of nowhere, especially for making some fantasy nonsense. And what idiot would even go watch something like that? In the end, the fantasy nonsense trilogy made around $3 billion. And counting the theater's cut, Connery could have pocketed at least $230 million. Some say it was even $400 million, but either way, it's the biggest paycheck any actor ever got. Seeing how audiences reacted to the Wachowskis, Peter Jackson's, and Chris Columbus's films, Sean got pretty upset and took a 3-year break. To ease his pain, the Queen knighted him and made him a Sir, though it's not like that helped much. So, Sean decided to get back to business with a film he didn't understand either. Sean swore he didn't want to do The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, even for $17 million they offered him. The actor didn't see anything interesting in the comic adaptation or comic itself, and the script looked like a junkie's fever dream to him. But Sean realized that in the past few years, he'd turned down massive hits for the same reason, so maybe League of Extraordinary Gentlemen actually had a chance. The script Connery could ignore, but he couldn't do the same with the director Stephen Norrington. Stephen had turned down Blade's sequel for this movie, and later called that the worst mistake of his life. On set, Connery didn't spare him and yelled with the full power of his lungs. The clashes were so bad that Norrington refused to take part in the film's press tour and never directed anything again. Maybe it really was the psychological trauma Connery inflicted on him. Though the box office numbers probably played their part too. With a budget of $78 million, the movie made $179 million. That doesn't look like a financial disaster at first glance, but the studio insisted it actually was, and critics hated it. League got smacked by basically every moviegoer. After this film, Sean said he didn't understand Hollywood anymore and walked away from the profession. The actor explained his decision by saying that cinema had changed too much and that he couldn't rely on the same principles in choosing projects like he used to. That, for some reason, big commercial movies now seemed like nonsense to him, and that you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and a dinosaur like him was better off retiring. Connery was 73 when he voiced all that, and the actor never appeared in films again, making just a couple of exceptions to voice Scottish documentaries. The actor died 5 years ago at the age of 90, which surely sounds sad, but there's really no reason for drama here. Sean lived a long life, and the way he lived it is something the whole planet could envy. Connery became a legend twice, managing not to betray himself, receiving paychecks on Hollywood Olympus level, and staying a stud even as a retiree. And no matter who they cast as Bond now, Sean will stay the one nobody will ever reach. Well, maybe Mel Gibson, who was considered for 007 in the 80s, could have come a bit close, but that's not certain. You can see how and why Mel turned the roll down in our video about him. Thanks for watching. Leave a like, subscribe, hype the vid, whatever the hell that means, and see you next time.